Kaya Shilaya Lehapiku Le Tunuwe Aye Ni Waya Kaya Bia Aya Waya Ni Galaya Pecha Aye Kaya Ku Tehi Ke Waya Ni Chinte Le hapiku le tunue ni waya kaya bia aya waya ni galaya kuyo pecha kaya ku tehi ke waya ni chinte le hapiku le tunue. Hey, okay, well, I want to greet everybody here this evening. It's really great to see this many of you. And I wanted to say that I'm really happy to have this opportunity to be hosted by Greenacre, and like to acknowledge the staff there, and also the fact that it's an agency of the National Spiritual Assembly, and I've had the privilege of being there several times, and I'd like to, of course, thank the staff, and also Christopher Buck, who's here, and I'd like to mention that Christopher has been working on this topic for a really long time, which is the topic about regarding the spiritual heritage of North America, and I got interested in this topic because through my mother was her parents came. Her dad was born in the 1880s, and her mom was born in the 1890s, and so the way my mom grew up amongst people that were all basically 19th century people, they would always, in all the activities that my mom attended, they would always acknowledge these divine luminaries, these holy souls that had appeared and were the ones responsible for the establishing these the laws and the precepts and the divine teachings that have been the basis of the spiritual heritage here in North America for tens of thousands of years. And so this is the milieu that she grew up in, and this is why that one of her projects that she went to the grave striving to accomplish was to create this awareness of the spiritual heritage of North America based on these divine luminaries. And so it's really wonderful to meet up with Christopher Buck, who's been pursuing this parallel interest, and so we've been able to join forces in recent times to leading to a series of articles, quite a few articles that have been published in Bahá'í-teachings.org, and so of course now the teachings, the spiritual heritage that I'm most familiar with is from the local area right here in around Standing Rock and surrounding regions, which is the teachings of this woman, this holy soul called Ptahintchula Skawwe, who appeared maybe could have been hundreds of years ago, and according to winter counts, they put the date as around 900 AD that she appeared and brought these heavenly teachings that form the basis of the identity of the people in this area, who referred themselves collectively as Ocheti Shakoi, or people of the seven fireplaces, or also known as Lakota or Dakota. So with that, I wanted to ask Chris if he could share a little bit with us about his interest and what led him to this point here.
Sure, Kevin. Thank you. I want to say, first of all, I really appreciate this event hosted by Acre on such a worthy topic. In a sense, a topic of longstanding interest, but relatively new as far as its attention, the attention it's been receiving. I want to echo what Kevin just mentioned about our now 64 articles in the series entitled Indigenous Messengers of God. This is hosted on Bahá'í-teachings.org. Bahá'í-teachings.org, and that's how you spell it without the apostrophe, is the largest, most popular Bahá'í website in the world today. It is not an official Bahá'í website, and with every article comes a disclaimer. So I wanted to preface this by saying that everything we're saying today is based on our personal understanding. This is not an official position of the Bahá'í Faith. We are allowed to provide our own understandings, to share them. And we're going to present a PowerPoint presentation later on after when Kevin gives me the cue. And you'll see this disclaimer on an early slide. Now, the history of my interest in this topic was quite by accident. In 1993, I was studying for my PhD in the academic study of religion at the University of Toronto. There was an issue of the Journal of Baha'i Studies, which had a research note, meaning a short article, on languages of revelation. And the author went through this tablet and gleanings where Baha'u'llah says that the first language that originally all languages were one, then they diversified. Hebrew emerged as a language of revelation, the language of the crossing. And then curiously, Baha'u'llah mentions Syriac before mentioning before mentioning Arabic. So the research notes said, well, maybe we should be looking for revelations and manifestations of God who revealed in the Syriac language. Now, as you know, Jesus spoke in Aramaic. He was probably trilingual because in his first sermon, as recorded in Luke chapter 4, he reads from Isaiah. And also, since Greek was the lingua franca, the common language, he probably was conversant in Greek as well. So Syriac may refer to the Christian revelation because the Bab in a text talks about the gospel Syriac. So that could be what Baha'u'llah meant by the language of Syriac as a language of revelation. That is speculation on my part. In response to the research note, I wrote an email to Christine Zerbany, who was then editor of the Journal of Baha'i Studies, and I said, well, look, if we're going to be searching for possible other manifestations of God, why not look in this hemisphere among the Native Americans, the terminology I was using then, Native Canadians and so on. And Christine wrote back and said, why don't you write us something on that? So I took a break from my studies and I wrote a paper called Native Messengers of God in Canada, a test case for Baha'i Universalism. In 1994, not to brag about this at all, but to show you a comment on the interest that it sparked. It won the Award for Excellence in Baha'i Studies for 1994. I was given the award in the Harvard Law School at the annual Association for Baha'i Studies meeting. It was presented to me by Dr. David Rue, who gave the Hassan Memorial Address. And he began his address by talking about Dagana Wida, the peacemaker. We'll be talking about this Indigenous Messenger of God later today. He said he was a great prophet of peace, and that's published in the Journal of Baha'i Studies. Now, the late Dr. Rue was speaking as an individual. As you know, he was a former member of the Universal House of Justice. More recently, I posted on Facebook another quote from a 2019 video by former House of Justice member Hooper Dunbar about Viracocha, who he called a great prophet as well. So these are examples to show that we're not alone in this thinking. It's a new area, like I said. So the long and the short of it is, even though I got the award in 1994, it was reviewed 6 times by reviewers for the Journal of Baha'i Studies. And it was my impression that it was too hot a topic, frankly, for that journal to publish. So long story short, 2 years later, the article was published in Baha'i Studies Review. At the time, the leading Baha'i journal. It's now been discontinued. The last issue appeared, I think, earlier this year. So that's the history, Kevin.
Okay, very good. And I wonder if you can also can you also share a little bit about the tablet of to Aamir Khan?
Sure. I've known about the tablet to Aamir Khan. It's not officially named that. I've been calling it that because of the recipient, whose name was obviously Aamir Khan. And my dear wife, Nazi Abadi Buck, introduced this to me before we were married. She had taken all 5 years of the most intensive Baha'i studies courses ever offered by the late Dr. Riaz Ghadimi. And in the 5th year, all of the participants had to memorize by heart the entire Kitab-e-Aqdas in Arabic, in its original Arabic. Nazi kept meticulous notes. And I asked her, I was thirsty for knowledge. I'd read everything I could. It was published in English. I wanted more knowledge. She read to me from her notes. I don't think it talked about Aamir Khan, but it talked about what we're going to call today the topic of Indigenous Messengers of God. The tablet to Aamir Khan has been posted on the additional tablets in the Baha'i Reference Library website. It's an authorized translation. Can the host pull that up? Okay, extract from a tablet of Abdul Baha. In ancient times, the people of America were, through their northern regions, close to Asia. That is, separated from Asia by a strait. For this reason, it hath been said that crossing had occurred. There are other signs that indicate communication. As to places where people were not informed of the appearance of prophets, such people are excused. In the Quran, it hath been revealed, quote, we will not chastise them if they had not been sent a messenger. That's from Quran chapter 17, verse 15. Undoubtedly, in those regions, the call of God must have been raised in ancient times, but it hath been forgotten now. That's the tablet. I call your attention to the very last line, which in Kevin's and my understanding and the understanding of others as well, again, with the disclaimer that this is not an official interpretation, this establishes definitively as an authoritative Baha'i text the principle of manifestations of God, or what we call messengers of God, to the Americas. We cannot add names of manifestations of God that are not attested in the Bible, Quran, or the Baha'i writings. There's a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi to that effect. But as Dr. Rue said in the 1994 ABS Association for Baha'i Studies meeting, when this text was brought up during the discussion after I had presented my Native Messengers in Canada paper, he stood up. This session was not recorded. And he said, friends, we must not be too dogmatic about this letter written on behalf of the Guardian. And then he explained why. Without going, again, that was his private interpretation. Now, tradition references these possible, what we call Indigenous Messengers of God, and we can mention them in our dialogues with indigenous peoples, okay, with indigenous nations, or as when I was in Canada at the time, the term was called First Nations. And we can show respect and we can acknowledge. It's just that we cannot officially say that Daganawida the Peacemaker or White Buffalo Calf Woman were definitely manifestations of God. That said, there's a very interesting letter. I could find it if you wanted to. It's on my Facebook page. From the Universal House of Justice to a Baha'i Unity Conference that was held on a Navajo reservation in, what city is that in Arizona? Do you
Ganado.
remember, Kevin?
It's in
Yes.
Yeah.
If we could pull that out, it references messengers of God who are also called wise ones. And in our discussion with the Baha'i National Baha'i Center, because we're planning to offer a course, we proposed a course through the WorldMed Institute. I've been teaching as a faculty member at the WorldMed Institute since about 2001 or 2002. So nearly 20 years. And the course was approved by the National, and the PowerPoint presentation has been reviewed by National also with some advice. I don't think I'm permitted to share it right now, but Kevin has that, so we're good to go. We may be referring to them preferentially as wise ones because the WorldMed Institute, just like Greenacre, is an agency of the National Spiritual Assembly. So we can't, again, officially say that Daganawida the Peacemaker or Viracocha or White Buffalo Calf Woman or Quetzalcoatl or any of the other Indigenous Messengers of God. As an attorney, we can say putative, meaning alleged, meaning they may or they may not be. True.
Did you want me to read that message?
Would you please? I'd be delighted.
Yeah, I've got it on my wall here.
On your wall?
Yeah, I have it over here. I always look at it. I didn't memorize it, but I always look at it here. It says, the all-wise creator of earth and heaven has from the beginning, which has no beginning, sent to his people's divine messengers to guide them to the straight path. These wise ones have come to establish the unity of the kingdom in human hearts. This great evolutionary process of building the organic unity of the human race has entered a new stage with this mighty message of Baha'u'llah. His voice is the voice of the Great Spirit. His love for humankind is the force of the new age. He who sends the rain, who causes the sun and the stars to shine, the rivers to flow, the winds to blow, and the earth to give forth her bounties, has, in this great day, sent to all mankind Baha'u'llah. It is this great one who has opened the door of divine knowledge to every soul. It is his teachings that will establish world unity and bring about universal peace. The people of the world are the tools in his hand. They must strive to understand his message and to walk in the path of his divine guidance. Every human being is responsible in this day to seek the truth for himself and thereafter to live in accordance to that wise counsel. The old ones have all longed for this sweet message. Praise God that you have found it, now awakened to new wisdom, now guided to the straight path, now illumined with this mighty message. Strive you day and night to guide and assist the thirsty ones in all lands to the ever-flowing fountain, the wandering ones to this fortress of certainty, the ignorant ones to this source of knowledge, and the seekers to that one for whom their hearts long.
Kevin, that is one magnificent letter from the house, and unique style, wouldn't you say?
Say it again.
Unique in its style, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. It really is.
Can you comment on Messengers of God and Indigenous and the audience and what you think is being conveyed in this letter?
Well, somehow it's just an affirmation of this, these the promises of these wise. The term that the Lakota people pray to Tunkashila, and Tunkashila means grandfather, and it's a very formal way of addressing one's grandfather. So
Good.
then this I'll just mention this the reason why the Lakota people, when they pray to grandfathers, because this woman, this holy woman who came and brought the laws, she cited her authority that she was commissioned by the grandfather to bring a portion of his love to humankind, and that she was authorized to bring this. And so this term grandfather that she's referring to is the one that sent all the holy souls, all the messengers. So I know that I might be considered a heretic to say this, but to my understanding, when the Lakota people pray to Tunkashila, that's Baha'u'llah. That's Baha'u'llah, the one who authorized all the holy souls to appear. And so, this is the thing that I'm talking about, that like from my mom's generation and even up into recent times, the older people had always acknowledged this source. And that's where that song, that first song that I sang, it says, "Grandfather, you have promised this." You see, it's like this promise, this relationship, or I guess you could maybe say it's a covenant. The covenant that Tunkashila promised that he would always abide with us and be with us from his realms on high, and to carry us through, to carry us across hardships and difficulties, which seems to be the current plight of humankind collectively at this moment now. Yeah.
Kevin, do you want to say some more, or do you want to segue into our PowerPoint?
Yeah, it might be good to go to the PowerPoint here, if we could.
Let me tell you about the history of this particular PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint because brand names often become generic names. I created this slide presentation in Keynote, which is an Apple product. Now, why did I do this? The reason was simple. Kevin wrote me a one-line email, "Chris, can you create a PowerPoint?" That's what I did. I have the message. I can produce it if asked. So I did. Now, Kevin and I have been in frequent communication for the past couple of years, however long this Indigenous Messengers of God series on Bahá'í-teachings.org has been around. I first titled it Native Messengers of God, and then later on, when Kevin and I started collaborating, he suggested we change the name, which we did. Now, I knew, what Kevin and I had, his thinking as well as my thinking. So after I did this PowerPoint slideshow, I sent it to Kevin and he gave me some feedback. And we're going to invite your feedback. You guys, today, when we started, there were 85 viewers. How many viewers now are there, Jessica?
We're at 100, which is our limit.
So you maxed out, okay.
Mm-hmm.
You are our focus group, dear friends. We want feedback on this, and we've asked our host, Jessica and Robert, to post this PDF and also to post a couple of other items, which we'll go through in a little while. It took me a lot of effort to get a hold of this photo, which I first saw in a Baha'i World. It comes from the Green Light Expedition, and of course it was in black and white. So long story short, I got hold of this color photo. And as you see, there's a sign in Spanish that says, Baha'u'llah is the return of Viracocha, ancient Indian messenger of God. Incan, pardon me, is what I meant to say. Kevin, before we go to the second slide, would you like to comment on this prophecy?
Yeah, it's from the Tablets of Divine Plan, and if you find it in the tablets, you'll see it's sandwiched in between these statements that the Master made regarding, especially Central America, which is I would say is the place where really this the Baha'i faith has taken off amongst indigenous population. But it is a it is a conditional prophecy of Abdul Baha regarding the potential of the indigenous people, I would say, of the entire hemisphere. So it's really striking. It's very unique in that regard as being a prophecy pertaining to a whole hemisphere of people.
Thank you, Kevin. A non-Baha'i scholar, her name is Chelsea Horton, did her master's thesis at Simon Fraser University and then her PhD dissertation at the University of British Columbia on what she called the Baha'i or Aboriginal encounter in British Columbia. And in both her thesis and dissertation, she refers to this prophecy, Kevin, I think you may have seen this before, as the sole racial prophecy in the Baha'i writings.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is, but it calls attention to the uniqueness of this prophecy. So, as Kevin said, all prophecies, and I've studied comparative apocalyptic literature for years, and I have another series on Bahá'íTeachings.org called Figuring Out Prophecy. It's about 50 articles. And it talks about how prophecies in general have conditions before they can become fulfilled. Next slide, please.
This is a work in progress. The views expressed in our content reflect individual perspectives and do not represent the official views of the Baha'i Faith.
Now, thank you, Jessica.
My pleasure.
This is the disclaimer that appears at the beginning of each and every one of Kevin and my articles. In fact, at the beginning of every single article in Bahá'íTeachings.org. When this is already posted online, this PDF, and if you click the photos, it'll go to the source where each photo is. But most importantly, as this first presentation, and you guys being the focus group, we want your feedback. And we want constructive feedback. In other words, let's tweak this. If there can be better wording here and there, then we might use it. Okay, so this is our disclaimer and our invitation for feedback. Anything to say about feedback that we're inviting, Kevin?
No, that's very good. Yeah, we can go to the next slide, huh?
Okay, this is the tablet from the prophecy. In short, quote, attach great importance to the indigenous population of America. Likewise, these Indians, should they be educated and guided, there can be no doubt that they will become so illumined as to enlighten the whole world. Comment, Kevin?
Well, I'd like to mention that I think by America is referring to the hemisphere, the whole hemisphere.
Good. We tend to focus on North America. That's what the advance announcement said. But we believe that this refers to all of the Americas, which are more or less half the world. Wouldn't you say, Kevin?
Yeah. Geographically, it's half there's two hemispheres, east and west. Of course, there's north and south too, but they both divide the world in half. So then this whole half of the planet is Western Hemisphere. And so, yeah, there's the population of the Western Hemisphere is what's referred to here.
Thank you. So we can't leave out half the world, right, Kevin?
That's right. Yeah, that's what I kind of think that way myself. Yeah.
Next slide, please.
So it says this prophecy is not self-executing. Abdul Baha's remarkable prophecy is a true prophecy, but the prophecy has yet to come true. The prophecy is not self-authenticating. The conditions must first be right and ripe for fulfillment. That's where we come in. Yeah. So yeah, it's a conditional prophecy. So it requires this interaction of all of us really in order to bring this prophecy into fulfillment or realization.
There's a text that I'd like our viewers to try to find. It's really a needle in a haystack that offers a parallel Baha'i writing or Baha'i text on the idea of the conditionality of prophecies. We know that from Baha'u'llah's 1890 encounter or audience with, or I should say, Professor Edward Granville Brown's audience with Baha'u'llah on Wednesday, April 16th, 1890, if I'm not mistaken. You guys can read about this in an article called Scholar Meets Prophet. It's an article published in Baha'i Studies Review, and in which I took, I looked at E.G. Brown's diary when he visited Acre, and looked at all the sessions in which he had attained the presence of Baha'u'llah. Now, Baha'u'llah, as you know, says that the most great peace shall come. So that's an authentic prophecy. It's a prophecy that will be fulfilled. And here's the text that I want our viewers to search for if there's an intrepid researcher there. I recall a text by Shoghi Effendi where he says that the Baha'is may hasten, meaning speed up, the advent of the lesser peace. Very interesting statement. Now, as you know, the lesser peace is part of the major plan of God. The plans that we are prosecuting as Baha'is are part of the minor plan of God. I won't go through this now, but to cross over and say that something in the major plan of God can be hastened by the Baha'is who are operating within the minor plan of God is quite interesting. And I think if we can speed up the advent of the most great peace, then that's evidence of some conditionality. Wouldn't you say, Kevin?
Yes.
Next slide, please.
This prophecy will come true, but how? Abdu'l-Baha foresaw the future, when the indigenous peoples of the Americas will enlighten the world. This prophecy, Baha'is believe, will come true. Not a matter of if, but of how and when. But what about the process of its fulfillment? That's what the Bahá'í-inspired Institute process is all about.
Comment, Kevin?
No, that's really it. That's what we are at that stage now. I remember I was an auxiliary board member, and I attended the inauguration of the International Teaching Center when it was constructed, and we divided into plenary sessions. And one of the first speaker at this plenary session was a man from Argentina, and he recalled as a very young person when he was present when Ruhia Khanum visited his community, his really remote community out in the Gran Chaco in Argentina, and he described just sitting there spellbound as she praised the people for having resisted, the materialism from the immigrant population, European immigrant population, and had managed to maintain the purity of their ancestral heritage, the spiritual legacy. And he went into detail, but just to summarize what he was talking about, maybe there's some people out there now that were there as well. But anyway, as I recall, she said, but now today, the people, she said, your people are being summoned to this high, all of us are being summoned to this lofty summit. Baha'u'llah is inviting us to ascend now this summit that will raise all of humankind to nobility. But he said that she warned them. She said before them is a big chasm, a great chasm of materialism that they have to cross. And so he said that he commented that ever since he heard her speaking that way, he was really troubled because all through his life he saw just the people falling in over that cliff into that chasm of materialism, and he just thought it's not possible. There's no way to overcome that. But he said now finally the Baha'i world has created a bridge that will enable us collectively to go beyond, to cross over this chasm of materialism. And he said that's the Institute process, and we have it in place now. so we can now safely traverse, make this perilous crossing. So I love that. It always stuck with me, that analogy he gave.
Thanks, Kevin. I hadn't heard that before. Here we see 4 core activities. Jessica, would you read the captions, please?
Sure thing. Left photo is the Bahá'í-inspired children's class in Panama. The right photo is the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Group in Bolivia. Top center is a Baha'i Study Circle in Panama. And lower center is a Baha'i Devotional Gathering in Panama.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
The will and wisdom to fulfill. This prophecy requires the will and wisdom to fulfill and to be fulfilled. Although this prophecy is certain to occur, when and how it will happen depends on time and circumstance. In other words, the conditions first must be right. In other words, ripe. As with the lesser piece, which has its own progressive stages, Abdu'l-Baha's prophecy involves a process of fulfillment over time. This process ideally is progressive in nature.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, now I didn't get this photo of Kevin from his website, nor from Patricia Locke Foundation website. I wanted to mention the Patricia Locke Foundation. Would you tell our viewers what that is, Kevin?
Well, it was just that my mom, her name was Patricia Locke. She did so much in her lifetime with regard to all sorts of different, she was really a political activist, and she was very much at the forefront of all these activities. And she successfully lobbied Congress, and she, for instance, such as the Indian Child Welfare Act, she was a key player in that. The Indian Post-Secondary Education Act, which is one of her real pet projects, which was to create a higher education delivery system for really, really rural indigenous communities. And of course, one of the main ones that she worked on was the American Indian Freedom of Religion Act, which was passed in 1978. So after 500 years of immigrant populations coming here, the indigenous people finally were granted a right to practice their own devotional expression. So anyway, this Patricia Locke Foundation is just created to carry on some of the visions and foundational projects that she put in place.
Thank you, Kevin. And in the 1993 World Parliament of Religions, which was the centenary of the original 1893 World Parliament of Religions in Chicago at the Chicago World Fair, where the Baha'i Faith was mentioned in America for the first time. In 1993, your mother, Patricia Locke, and Jacqueline Left Hand Bull presented a resolution that almost passed, didn't quite pass because of a problem, but she and Jacqueline Left Hand Bull talked about the myriad messengers of God in the Americas. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So she was involved in this topic too, and was, advocating that this spiritual heritage or these spiritual heritages be recognized. So this slide talks about synergy. Jessica, what's your understanding of synergy? What does that mean?
My understanding of synergy is more than one thing working together for something in common, and their interaction creates something that is more than the individuals could do on their own.
Very good. By the way, this photograph came from the Baha'i Media Bank at the Baha'i World Center website. Okay, so the first precondition, we talked about conditions, and I'm going to use the word precondition, meaning it has to happen before. The first precondition for the fulfillment of this prophecy is a dynamic interaction or interplay between the sacred teachings of the Baha'i Faith and sacred indigenous traditions. It is the dynamic and exemplary synergy between the two that will probably become the greatest cause of the enlightenment foreseen and foretold by Abdu'l-Bahá. We see this process of the gradual progressive unfurlment of Abdu'l-Bahā's prophecy as a series of stages or steps as follows. Now, before going to the next slide, let me try to explain what this rather new concept is all about. I'm a Baha'i, but Abdu'l-Bahá didn't prophesy that I would enlighten the world, right? But Abdu'l-Bahá did prophesy that indigenous peoples would enlighten the world. What's the difference? Kevin and I have discussed this at great length, and we think it's what the culture of these First Nations brings to the table, that there will be reciprocal illumination. Comment, Kevin?
Yeah, well, illumination, we can see because, we have this full spectrum. We can, all the different facets of light within the spectrum create our vision, our ability to perceive. And so now with this, there is this element now which has long been excluded from the spectrum, and that's what John F. Kennedy said in 1963. He said the American Indian is the least understood and most misunderstood American. So now I think this is what we're trying to do, is to create this a better understanding, so that this added dimension, or this facet within the spectrum, can now be included, so that we can see things more clearly. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. Next slide, please. All right, Jessica, would you like to read this?
Sure thing. Also, before I read it, I just want to do a time check. We're at 8:57, and we had advertised that this would go till around 9. And I feel like we need to have a second session or a third session, because there's so much here. So I just want to make you guys aware of that.
I think we should do a second session.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Okay, step 1, spiritual parity. Baha'i and indigenous sacred traditions as equal. For synergy to occur, first there needs to be reciprocal recognition and respect of indigenous and Baha'i spirituality. Spiritual parity between Baha'i and indigenous sacred traditions as equal is a first step in the process of progress and fulfillment of Abdu'l-Bahā's prophecy. We believe that the tablet to Aamir Khan cited below is a key starting point for this process.
Thank you. Let's take a look at that. I think I have posted a facsimile that was provided by the Baha'i World Center. There it is. And the Persian is transliterated for those who are Persian speaking. Those who are not Persian speaking can read this out loud. Al-Batay dar on Sefahat Niz dar Azmaneye Adime Bakti Nedaye Elahi. I can't read that, but I know it. Boland Gashte Valakin Hal Faramush Shodeast. Forgive any of the mispronunciation, but I think that's pretty close. So again, this was introduced to me by my dear wife Nazi, probably in 1983 or 1984. And I've studied this tablet ever since. So I think what we've done tonight is to establish the principle of Indigenous Messengers of God to the Americas. Wouldn't you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, that's a good introduction there.
So then in the next session, we can go over individual examples. Would that be a good plan?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about your homework. I was a university professor for 10 years, and of course, I'm still a faculty member at the Wilmette Institute. If Greenacre agrees, we have sent some materials for posting, and the links are already present, okay? One is to one example of an Indigenous messenger of God, according to sacred tradition. I can definitely say that. So remember that we want to show respect in our encounters. Remember these, when St. Paul encountered the men of Athens, remember what he said? "O ye men of Athens, I perceive that you are lovers of wisdom. I have come to teach you about whom you call the unknown God." Something like that. That might be a nice parallel verse to cite. So I was invited by the editor of the American Writers Series to write an article on Daganowida the Peacemaker. That's one article that I'd like you to post, Jessica, if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Another is this PowerPoint. Okay, so you can have a preview and look in advance if you like. The third item is a very interesting text called Concerning the League. Do you want to say something about Concerning the League, Kevin?
Yes, well, concerning the league is the tradition of the peacemaker, the one who appeared to unite all these warring peoples up there in the Finger Lakes region of New York, up in that area. And so then this text concerning the league was one of the first times that it was actually put down into writing, and it was done by this man that his photograph is on there. It's called Concerning the League, but he gave the recitation. It's done verbatim, and it still is done verbatim in each of the 5 languages there. But Chief Gibson did it in Onondaga language, and then it was subsequently translated into English. So this is the most complete account given of the teachings and the verbatim message that the peacemaker gave when he first came. This was prior to the arrival of immigrant populations here in this hemisphere.
Kevin, do you consider Concerning the League to be a holy book?
Yeah, well, I have read it. I mean, I need to read it some more, but it's very, very powerful. And to me, one can see that the account of the peacemaker is that he was endowed with some divine potency in order to compel the people to awaken from their darkened condition and turn to the light of unity.
Thank you, Kevin. And the fourth item that I hope Greenacre will post will be a chapter called Native American Myths and Visions of America from my 2015 book called God and Apple Pie. This chapter also discusses the peacemaker, but before that is the Haudenosaunee creation myth. And this was reviewed by 3 professors of American Indian Studies, 2 of whom were Native American or Indigenous. Now that would be posted along with another chapter, which you can read if you, this is by permission of the publisher. And the fourth item, no, that is the fourth item. So if these are made available, I'd like to welcome the scheduling of a second session.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any time for questions, Jessica.
The question that I've been receiving actually is about the message, Kevin, that you read when you went into your back room. What message that was from exactly?
That was from the Universal House of Justice to that gathering in Ganado on the Navajo Reservation. It was I think it was called a council fire, and you can find that it's in this compilation of messages from the Universal House of Justice. Now that copy that I have, it doesn't have the citation on it, but I know there's a lot of good researchers there that can find it in that compilation to the Baha'is gathered for the council fire in Ganado, Arizona.
Okay, thank you.
I think
Yes. What'd you say?
I think it's from the late 60s.
Okay. So Kevin and Christopher and Greenacre will be in touch about scheduling another time for a second session. Folks, you can go to Greenacre's new website, greenacre.news, and find events there. You can also find us on Facebook, and we will post when we're going to have the second session, and you feel free to either on Facebook or send us an email. You can contact us. You can find our contact info at greenacre.news. You can send your questions to us, and we'll figure out a way to post those documents, Christopher. I don't know how exactly we'll do it, but everybody keep looking. It may be on Facebook. We'll see. This is our first, we don't know how to do this yet. We're figuring it out right now.
Thank you. And will this video be posted too?
We hope so. It just depends on the video quality. I think it probably will be.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for hosting this.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for taking the time to talk with us about something that is really important. We know about the manifestations of God from all over the world, and yet what do we know about the manifestations of God in the land where we live? So thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody, be safe and wash your hands, everybody.
That's right.